Statistically, Duke versus Houston, Final Four, is the biggest matchup in at least 28 years. We'll explain why. Plus, do the Houston Cougars actually have a built-in advantage against Duke?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers, and thank you so much for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode, we'll discuss it's interesting what Stanford is doing. They have just brought in now what will be the third current former NFL coach to coach in the ACC. But will it even move the needle? We'll explain the move that Andrew Luck just made and whether or not this is even worth our time to talk about it. Massive changes that could be coming to spring football in the future. But let's start off with hoops. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. So you talk about the seismic matchup, Kenton, that we have for the late night Saturday night game, 8:39 p.m. It's going to be the nightcap for the two semifinal games in the Final Four. Duke taking on Houston. Now, Duke has the number one Ken Pom offensive ranking. Houston, the number one Ken Pom defensive ranking. And overall, this is the highest combined Ken Pom ranking of any two teams to ever go head-to-head. That dates back to 1997. That's why I mentioned this is statistically, you could argue, the biggest college basketball matchup we've had in the past 28 years. So, yeah, we're definitely going to be sitting right to our couches watching this one on Saturday night.
Oh, absolutely. Who wouldn't? You know, at the end of the day, you talk about college basketball and how, it's so many games, some of them kind of lose relevance. Well, now we're down to the last three games. The last three games of college basketball we're going to see up until turkey time of this year. This is just about what we've got going on here. So I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying, oh yeah, this is it. This is the time where we see clashes of the Titans like this, where you're like, oh man, we are quite literally seeing the irresistible force against the unmovable object. Greatest scoring offense in today's game, greatest scoring defense in today's game. Who moves the needle? Who does what they do best? Who can impose their will on the opponent? Mano a mano about two of the best in the game in terms of head coaches, in terms of roster, in terms of philosophies. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, all four coaches in this Final Four are yet to win their first natty. So someone's going to be winning a national title for the first time. Obviously, Shire has done it as a player, but as a coach, he has the opportunity to do it for the first time. But you think about when I talk about possible built-in advantages for Houston, you have to reach for some of this stuff, Kenton, because Duke has looked far and away head and shoulders the best team in the NCAA tournament to this point, right? But there are some things that can make Houston dangerous. We talked earlier this week about their three-point shooting, of course, their defense, but they haven't gone up against a team as long as Duke. But what about the experience factor? How much stock do you put into it? Houston being one of the older teams, Duke being one of the youngest teams in the country, and then also the John Shire versus Kelvin Sampson matchup. Sure, Kelvin has not won a national championship, but not only had Kelvin Sampson already been coaching in college basketball before John Shire was born, I saw Sampson apparently had 73 games coaching under his belt before John Shire's birth in 1987. So does this stuff move the needle for you when it comes to Houston?
Quick question. Is Sampson, how many threes has Sampson hit all season?
Maybe a few, like in shoot-arounds, if he's messing around with his players.
Well, what about John Shire? He's had to knock down a few, right?
Yeah, he does knock him down and shoot around. He's still got his stroke.
Well, in the game though, register stats, right? This ain't like baseball where the skipper has to wear a uniform because of some ancient rule that's like, oh, if you don't have enough players, the skipper. This ain't that, okay? With all due respect, and you and I talked about this a little bit off air. The higher up in level you go, the more coaching matters. Yes, when you get to the highest level, And even with basketball, not as much as with football, but even with basketball, when you get to the highest level where the difference between the best guy on the floor and the worst guy on the floor generally is not that great, that's when your coaching matters. In college, I'm trying to tell you right now, I don't think that Duke has one starter that I'm like, hey, buddy, get ready to learn enterprise rental car. Get ready. They've got a great program for former student athletes. When you're done,
the tools to be your own boss.
They give you the tools to be your own boss. You work hard, put in the dedication, you'll be a district manager in no time, buddy. There's not a single player in Duke's starting lineup that I will say that about. J.J. Jackson specifically told us that of all the guys in their team, there are 7 or 8 that are in the top 45 of next year's draft. That is the type of stuff that matters in games like this. And like I said, the experience thing, in terms of not even the coaches, just the players, the experience thing matters when the players feel like they're by themselves. Cooper Flagg does not feel like he's by himself, because if this team fails, nobody will look at this and say, this was Cooper Flagg's team and he couldn't get him a national championship. It was all on Cooper Flagg and he could not do it. Because again, you have multiple lottery picks on this squad with you. Multiple guys that will not be in the green room long on this squad with you. And you have a head coach that the hammer will much more likely come down on him than it will Cooper in terms of who can or can't get it done, because Cooper got one shot, one crack as a rookie. And if he couldn't get it done, people ain't going to be, too hard on him. John, however, we saw what Hubert Davis did year one. You saw your biggest rival in his first year instantly take his team to a Final Four. And you can't take your team to a national championship with much better pieces in place. Again, for as good as Armando Bacot was and all the records he set for rebound and double-doubles and all that, that young man is playing for the Memphis Groove. You've got 3 guys going in the top 10 to 15, and you're telling me you can't match what another guy did with, again, the star of the Memphis Groove. Okay.
And, at this point, Duke's freshmen, they're so battle-tested. To get this far, I don't really consider you a freshman anymore, honestly. I mean, it's one thing when you really start to get into conference play in January, or, once you have your first couple of NCAA tournament matchups or ACC tournament matchups. I mean, Duke, they're so battle-tested at this point. You don't really feel like they're even freshmen anymore. It's April now. I mean, you're not really a freshman anymore at this point. Blue Devils are favored by 4.5 points. Do you like Duke and to cover? That's part one. And then part two would be, if you like them to cover, who do they face in the final round?
Oh, man, this is tough. I'm going to tell you this. You talk about, in terms of which team has the advantage. I think we can all agree that Duke has the advantage, but the wild card is how well and at how high of a volume Houston can shoot threes. And I really and truly would not be surprised if they have an off night and all of a sudden the floodgates open and it's they're getting ready to set up for the parade in Durham already. But I also wouldn't be surprised if this thing was a nail biter that came down to the very last second, because again, if they get hot from deep, and mind you, them getting hot is not the aberration. As a team, I believe they're shooting 37% or something along those lines. So
it's closer to 40. I think it's like in the 39% range. Yeah,
closer to 40. So it's not even. We're not even talking about the 40%. Would have been for most teams. Oh, that's a hot night. You're hottest pitcher. That's average for them. So hot for Houston would be 50 something. Like that's flat out ridiculous. I would say Duke wins. I'm not sure if I'm taking the cover, because I feel like this is one of those rat lines where all of a sudden you're like, oh, they're up by 5 points coming down the stretch, and then Houston hits a couple threes and plays the free throw game, and they may not win it, but they bring it close enough to ruin your pocket. So I'd say I take Duke money line. I'll take Houston plus 4.5.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have I think I'd prefer to see Auburn versus Duke in the championship game because the oldest versus the youngest team would
Yeah.
be interesting. But I don't know. I just have this feeling about Florida. It's probably because Florida beat Auburn on the road in the regular season. I think it was mid-February. Like Florida got that, so they have a mental edge. I don't know. I'm kind of expecting Florida versus Duke.
I'll tell you what. If you're an ACC fan, and again, forget what some of my colleagues may say about we can't have ACC pride. I still believe in it. Okay. And I'm gonna tell you this.
Can I tell you a quick story about and why? Again, I'm gleaming with ACC pride, and we're gonna have a conversation about this on Locked On ACC tomorrow because I think one of the members of the squad doesn't think we're allowed to have pride in Duke. So I go to I go to the same grocery store clerk at my local Winn-Dixie because she's this sweet older lady. And, she's lives in Florida now, but she's Alabama Crimson Tide through and through. She's from Alabama. She's got the thick, kind of like, what is it? Is it your grandma is the big,
my grandmother loves her some Tide. Yeah. She loves
my grocery store clerk is like your grandma. She bleeds, Alabama Crimson. And and she knows what I do, and I'm a sports guy. And she's like, tell me about how, she's rooting so hard. The SEC still has 2 teams in there. And she even said as a Bama fan, she would root for Auburn in the national championship. She would root for Auburn. She wants the SEC to take down ACC or Big 12 if Houston can get through. So it's like, if this Bama loving person would actually be willing to root for Auburn over Duke, why can't I root for Duke?
Let me tell you something. I don't care if it was UNC versus my biggest ops in life. I don't care if it was UNC versus the devil. I'm rooting for the asteroid that day. You understand? Any other team in the ACC, I'm absolutely rooting for you. Miami, I'm with you. Virginia Tech, I'm with you. Virginia, I'm with you. Syracuse, I'm with you. Everybody in Louisville, go ahead, get in there. I'm with you. Cal, Stanford, welcome to the party, baby. SMU, you know I love me some SMU. I'm rooting for you. But my arch nemesis is going, and as long as it's the conference. See, and that's why I say the greatest rivalry in sports is the one that doesn't require a name. The one that's simply referenced as the game is the greatest by a mile. Because again, if it was that great, you wouldn't need a name. But that's, again, I got pride in the ACC, and my pride in the ACC wants Florida to win that game because I don't think there's a world where Florida beats Duke. Now, Auburn, however, there's a world. There's a few worlds where that could happen.
Now, and by the way, I'm with you on having limits because as much pride as I take in the ACC, like I never root for Florida State in a championship game being a Miami. Like there's certain bridges I'm not willing to cross when it comes to my ACC fandom. You guys want to keep it locked right here. Coming up next, you would not believe how many ACC teams are not even having spring games this year. I was looking at the schedule earlier today, and it's depressing, but could a looming decision from the NCAA turn that frown upside down? You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. Oh, we're only getting started with SupplyHouse. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. SupplyHouse. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, SupplyHouse is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? SupplyHouse offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Thank you for making Locked On ACC your first listen today. For your next listen, check out our other shows. Kenton, Gibbs, and Grayson Boone do an awesome job hosting Locked On Wolfpack, covering everything NC State. I cover everything Miami at Locked On Canes. All right, so, Kenton, we're both football junkies. I enjoy watching spring games, right? Like, I attend Miami's spring game in person every year. And I probably watched at least a half dozen other ACC spring games on ACC Network last year. I always enjoy it. And I'm looking at the schedule this year. We've seen this trend. This was seemingly started by Nebraska, USC, Ohio State. They just said, you know what? We're not going to do a spring game because, we don't want to put film of our players out there to be tampered with in the transfer portal. Schools have varying reasons for not doing spring games. But I'm looking at the ACC this year, Kenton. Boston College, no spring game. Florida State, no spring game. Mike Norvell doesn't even let the media watch any part of practice. Like, he's got it completely locked down after 2-10 last year. No spring game, no practice viewing, nothing. They do practice, but the media can't watch any of it. NC State, no spring game. SMU, no spring game. At least Rhett Lashley admitted that it wasn't because of a fear of tampering. It's more, a fear of, running the types of plays for the fans that you don't really want to run with a real scrimmage. So he was more honest about it. And Stanford, no spring game, which kind of makes sense given the coaching change that they're about to have there. So 5 ACC schools are not even doing a spring game. I think even a couple of them are not doing traditional spring games. They're doing like all access practices. I think that's what North Carolina, no spring game. So that's a 6th one. No spring. They're doing a fan fest, which does not count as a spring game. So more than a quarter of ACC football schools are not having a spring game. Can we turn this trend upside down, Kenton, if the NCAA ever approves team versus team joint practices and spring games?
Say what you want about Gundy over there in Stillwater, but he did pose a very interesting question when he said, what are they going to do to us if we do it? What are they going to do? What's the NCAA going to do? And I agree. What are they going to do? What's wrong with this, unjust about this, unfair about this? Again, I am a big believer in fairness. I'm a big believer in, yes, the group of 5 schools already start behind the 8 ball. We should give them adequate time to make adjustments. We should not just roll out, hey, if we want to do this change, then this change should happen. I'm saying that even as an ACC guy, even as a guy that we know all of our schools, not just the schools that we have represented on the show, SMU would have no problem flying to wherever, right? If whoever wants to play them, if Rutgers wants to see them, they won't have a problem saying, bet, let's get up there to Piscataway. Y'all come down here to us next year. And it's not a problem. But for the sake of fairness, I understand not wanting to roll it out this year. Beyond this year, what the hell is the NCAA going to do about it? It should be a thing where everybody should be looking for somebody. It doesn't matter if you're a big school or a small school. Everybody, call up whoever you think your counterpart is somewhere else in the country. Hey, we want to come play. Hey, we'd love to come see you. Hey, Buffalo, we'd love to come see you. This is the head coach from San Jose State. You all come over here for a year. We go over there for a year. How's that sound? Oh, great. Hey, NC State, we want to come see you. We're here at Nevada. We want to see who the best Wolfpack is. Come on, let's do it. All that type of stuff. I think every school, once you have the infrastructure and money in place to do so, once you have about a year to get your ducats in a row to do that, should have the ability to do so. And if you're a school that doesn't have the money to facilitate, oh, we can't travel, great. Host one of the schools that has the money to travel, and they'll travel to you. So I think it's foolishness to not have this change. When, again, it's better for fans. It does more for TV. And all of this talk about injury. Do people not understand spring practice is still real football practice? That's still real spill. Like, that's still a lot of very large, very angry young men trying their hardest to move other young men against their will. That is the essence of football, period. Doesn't matter how deep we get into the spread and the run and shoot and all that. At the end of the day, there's still going to be the people close to the ball trying violently to move each other. And guess what? Even when you get those deep passes and all that, do you know what the funny thing is about a wide open passing game? People tend to forget this. Force equals mass times velocity. So if you are doing all this throwing around the yard, that just means guys with slightly smaller masses are moving at much higher velocity to one another. So again, this is not, obviously you tell the team that you're practicing against, hey, we're here to get in good work. This is not a full game. We are not trying to kill each other, protect each other, but get in good work. get in good, quarterbacks don't throw no hospital balls. We're not going to kill your guy.
Right.
We're not going to kill him. But please, because I've seen it in real life in spring practice where a quarterback throws an absolute hospital ball and the defender is like, I'm going to let you cook. But, I could have put that boy on IR.
One of our listeners had a suggestion, and this is probably inspired by the fact that, the teams that really started talking about this, Deion Sanders, Colorado Buffaloes, Big 12, Fran Brown, Syracuse, ACC. And someone suggested to us, maybe the ACC and Big 12 should explore a partnership or a scheduling agreement because, and it would make sense. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're like, well, hey, we'd rather face someone from the SEC or the Big 10. But honestly, SEC and Big 10, I think, are less likely to want to do this, where the ACC and the Big 12, they would need something like this more. You're talking about the extra TV coverage and probably something a TV network would pay you to broadcast your spring game. That's something the Big 12 and the ACC need a lot more due to the revenue gap. So can you imagine next year if it sounds like Fran Brown and Deion already have like a handshake agreement to do this. So maybe you get Syracuse versus Colorado. Maybe you get like Miami versus UCF or Miami versus Texas Tech or something. You don't go down the line and make your matchups. Florida State against BYU, like whatever you want, or Florida State against Arizona State coming off their good year. So honestly, I think this is something that could actually help the Big 12 and the ACC.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. I think that partnership would mean a lot. And even beyond that, the only pairing that couldn't happen, I'm sure SMU would be staring down TCU like, hey, big head, y'all thought y'all could litigate us away? That's the only pairing that couldn't happen. Every other pairing is possible. Anybody else that wants to play somebody else, what incentive does Arizona State have to not play Cal? What incentive does TCU have to not take a shot at SMU? Or TCU or whoever at Stanford. What is it there? There's nothing that's stopping Louisville and Oklahoma State from, going at each other, filling each other out for a couple rounds there. I think that this thing would be absolutely fantastic for a ton of reasons. And again, this would be a moment where the ACC and the Big 12 are acknowledging, hey, you know what? We don't have the same cachet. We don't have the same brand and all that, but we're doing everything we can to make up the gap.
Yeah.
And that's all anybody who is a logical, reasonable ACC fan, ACC alum, sports purveyor, anybody who is those things would say, hey, the ACC is doing all they can. They're doing all they can. And that would be a massive step towards that. And I already know our boy, your Mark down there in the Big 12, he's not turning down any show. I know he's not turning. There's not a single show. There's not a single opportunity. I was thinking about all of the Locked On conference channels and who matches up with their commissioner the best. There couldn't be a better matchup between Drake Toll and your Mark.
Yeah.
Those two are kindred spirits. If one of them died before the other, I'd say that they were the other person reincarnated. Because I'm telling you right now, the showman is alive and well in both of them.
You're right about that. And how about this for an odd ACC move? The Stanford Cardinal and Andrew Luck, their GM, they got my attention. This is a very interesting move that Stanford made, but will it matter? You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On ACC. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Guys, when I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was overpaying with all the streaming services and ordering delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
You know, I know that the East Coast bias certainly comes into play, but if you haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in Stanford, so, you know, within the last couple of weeks, they had themselves a little scandal brewing with their former head football coach, Troy Taylor, accused of bullying female staffers. Apparently, he even tried to get the compliance officer fired who was investigating. It was a nasty scene there. And Andrew Luck, and it was also interesting that Andrew Luck, their GM, he was the one who actually made the decision to fire Taylor. Usually that comes from the AD or you know, the university president or chancellor, but Andrew Luck is there taking care of business. He's got full control over his football program. And so then, Kenton, you're in this weird situation where how do you hire a head football coach in late March? It's not good timing on that, right? Most of the desirable candidates already have jobs elsewhere, and even the ones who might be out of work or on hiatus may not want to take over that late in the process. And so Andrew Luck rings up his old buddy Frank Reich, former head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Luck played for him, of course, so they've got the connection. He's got him on speed dial. And so Andrew Luck, he convinces Frank Reich to come coach the Stanford Cardinal. But the interesting about this is, and this is now the third ACC coach with NFL head coaching experience. You got Bill Belichick, you got Bill O'Brien, and you got Frank Reich now. But Reich is strictly, Kenton, coming in as an interim guy. Made it very clear this week in his press conference that this is a one-year thing. He's not going to stick around. He's going to be the bridge guy, the caretaker, you would call him in soccer terms. And so, I mean, what is Frank Reich going to do? It's good to have somebody to hold it down, I guess, but for a team that's projected over under 3.5 wins this year, and he can't sell any recruits on being there beyond, and the recruiting cycle's over for this year, obviously, but then you can't recruit for next year. So it's like, does Frank Reich being there even move the needle?
Yeah, it does move the needle in the exact wrong direction. It moves the needle in the worst direction possible. Let me be clear about this. What was going on with Troy Taylor? If true, I have not looked into the allegations and all that enough to definitively say, hey, Troy Taylor deserved to be fired, whatever the case would be. I'm not going to lie and say I've looked into it, and I know the findings in that way. I do know what was alleged of him, and if those things are true, there's no place for that in our game, period. No place for it. Absolutely right decision by Luck and company. But the problem is, here's where the wrong decision comes in. Why would you hire a guy for only a year in college football? This ain't the NFL where everybody is getting paid at a level where it's like, hey, he can be as bad as he want to be. I'm making as much money as I want to. Remember Myles Garrett saying, I'm out. Cleveland ain't serious about winning. I'm leaving. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened? They signed him to a new contract, didn't they? They said something like $200 million, and he said, you know what? Winning is for losers. To hell with that winning nonsense. Give me the $200 million. You cannot do that in college football. So now you're looking at, like you said, the recruiting cycle next year. But let's go beyond next year, Donno. How do you recruit for the next couple years? Even when you bring in that new coach and you say, hey, we did everything we could to foster a positive environment, and it's just a situation where we had to get rid of that coach. Sure, but you're guaranteeing that your team is going to have 3 coaches in 3 years. Yeah, you're guaranteeing that.
Yeah.
Every other school, while everybody likes to pretend, oh, well, the best coaches, the best recruiters just talk up their program. Absolutely not. Every coach takes digs at other coaches. Every coach will slit your throat to get the player they want, and you're exposing it to them wide out there saying, yes, we have no coaching stability here in Palo Alto, but yes, we're still going to find a way to get the best players around the country. As if that job wasn't already hard enough because of academic rigor.
Yeah,
You then add on the layer of the travel cross-country to the ACC. You then add on a third layer of, hey, we're going to have 3 coaches in 3 years. I mean this very genuinely. Frank Reich winning 4 games will be an absolute success for him. But the next coach that comes in, if they get to a bowl game within their first 2 years, you have done a fantastic job. I can sing nothing but your praises because, again, this is just a crap show from Stanford at the moment. And again, the firing is not why it's a crap show. The hiring is.
I feel like, though, I don't think this is a terrible move with the awful hand that Andrew Luck was dealt with the timing, right? I mean, if
Fair.
you know, it sounds, and again, I'm not an expert on the investigations at Troy Taylor, but it seemed as though they had to make that move, but the timing is really bad. So, I mean, I guess Andrew Luck's decision making was, do I just elevate somebody from the current staff, or do I try to find some guy who can actually take control of it? I think the best case scenario for Stanford would be, and this would not be that easy to pull off, but if they can identify, because clearly Reich doesn't want to do it long term, right? So if they can, like early in the football season, if they can identify, a long-term guy so that he can kind of start, planting the seeds and recruiting and stuff. But I don't know how you do that either, because like if you're talking about July, August, September, like who's going to be available at that point? You're usually waiting for people to get fired elsewhere, or assistant coaches who are ready to leave their job late in the year. So it's like I don't really think there's a good solution for them now.
But let's talk about that second option here. Let's talk about the latter option. Assistant coaches who are ready to leave their job. What's the big thing that Jay Billis has been screaming all year, especially during the tournament, while these coaches are getting fired and hired during the tournament? Oh, the coaches portal is always open. I'm sorry to tell you.
It's true.
You think that if you're going to one of the better FCS coaches and say, hey, we'll give you a 50% raise, come on over to Stanford, they're going to say, oh, no. I'm happy here with the Idaho Vandals. You can't pull me away from them. No, never.
Yeah.
Actually, Idaho might be FBS, but you get the point. You get the point.
Yeah,
if there's an assistant coach somewhere that is absolutely crushing it, but they're at the G5 level, are you telling me that you're going to look up and say, you know what, that coach over there at Buffalo, their team seems to just be lighting it up every single year. Let's give that guy a shot. Let's give him a shot as an up-and-comer. He says no, because most likely that's what you're going to get anyway just next year. That you're not getting an established, you're not getting any really good coaches to come to Stanford with this situation. That's again, you got 3 layers of like things that are working against you. The intersections of those things compiling to pressure you down. And you imagine like, oh, well, if we just wait till next year, we'll get this great coach. Either way, you're the best bet that Stanford has is to go to some coach that they feel like is undervalued right now and say, hey, listen, come on over to be our head coach. Come on. How about it?
I think Andrew Luck should man up and coach the team himself. I mean, what do you want to be a football GM and man up, coach the team yourself, Luck. Stanford alumnus, couldn't be more perfect.
Hey, listen, I'll tell you this much, okay? That would be perfect, but it also has that effect of sometimes a guy's a little too close to it to do it. Because I can tell you,
He's his own boss.
Exactly. The way the Wolfpack fans talk about Sidney Lowe now, with all due respect to him, winning the last national championship here in one of the big 3 sports, it's shameful because he became the head coach. The basketball team didn't have a lot of success. Andrew Luck wants to avoid that for himself. As the college football GM, you'll never get the blame for your team not working out.
That's
So
a good point.
I'm not mad at him for not doing it. I am mad at him however, for not going out finding a top assistant and say, hey, man, they're not paying you enough over there. You got to listen
right
to that,
about
coach.
That. Like you're 1,000,000% right, because it's one thing to find like to find even a lower level head coach. They're not going to leave their job this time of year, but an assistant, that makes a lot more sense. I don't know if he probably felt extra pressure that we're right in the middle of spring football. Like he probably felt an extra pressure to do something, but we'll see how this one unfolds. It'll be interesting, that's for sure. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We'll have the squad on tomorrow. I know we're going to have some lively debates there. We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, right here on the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.